Book 5, Chapters 6 to 9 of 10 Books on Architecture. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Fredrik Karlsson. 10 Books on Architecture by Vitruvius. Translated by Morris Hickey Morgan. Chapter 6. Plan of the Theatre. 1. The plan of the theatre itself is to be constructed as follows. Having fixed upon the principal centre, draw a line or circumference equivalent to what is to be the perimeter at the bottom, and in it inscribe 4 equilateral triangles at equal distances apart and touching the boundary line of the circle, as the astrologers do in the figure of the 12 signs of the zodiac, when they are making computations from the musical harmony of the stars. Taking that one of these triangles whose side is nearest to the scaena, let the front of the scaena be determined by the line where the side cuts off a segment of the circle, and draw, through the centre, a parallel line set off from that position, to separate the platform of the stage from the space of the orchestra. 2. The platform has to be made deeper than that of the Greeks, because all our artists perform on the stage, while the orchestra contains the places reserved for the seats of senators. The height of this platform must not be more than 5 feet, in order that those who sit in the orchestra may be able to see the performances of all the actors. The sections, cunei, for spectators in the theatre, should be so divided that the angles of the triangles, which run about the circumference of the circle, may give the direction for the flights of steps between the sections as far as up to the first curved cross aisle. Above this, the upper sections are to be laid out, midway between the lower sections, with alternating passageways. 3. The angles at the bottom, which give the directions for the flights of steps, will be 7 in number. The other 5 angles will determine the arrangement of the scene. Thus, the angle in the middle ought to have the royal door opposite to it. The angles to the right and left will designate the position of the doors for guest chambers, and the 2 outermost angles will point to the passages in the wings. The steps for the spectators' places, where the seats are arranged, should be not less than 1 foot and a palm in height, nor more than 1 foot and 6 fingers. Their depth should be fixed at not more than 2½ feet, nor less than 2 feet. 4. The roof of the colonnade to be built at the top of the rows of the seats should lie level with the top of the scaena, for the reasons that the voice will then rise with equal power until it reaches the highest rows of seats and the roof. If the roof is not so high in proportion as it is lower, it will check the voice at the point which the sound first reaches. 5. Take 1/6 of the diameter of the orchestra between the lower steps, and let the lower seats at the ends on both sides be cut away to a height of that dimension so as to leave entrances. At the point where this cutting away occurs, fix the soffits of the passages. Thus their vaulting will be sufficiently high. 6. The length of the scaena ought to be double the diameter of the orchestra. The height of the podium, starting from the level of the stage, is, including the corona and cymatium, 1/12 of the diameter of the orchestra. Above the podium, the columns, including their capitals and bases, should have a height of 1/4 of the same diameter, and the architraves and ornaments of the columns should be 1/5 of their height. The parapet above, including its cyma and corona, is 1/2 the height of the parapet below. Let the columns above this parapet be 1/4 less in height than the columns below, and the architraves and ornaments of these columns 1/5 of their height. If the scaena is to have 3 stories, let the uppermost parapet be half the height of the intermediate one, the columns at the top 1/4 less high than the intermediate, and the architraves and coronae of these columns 1/5 of their height as before. 7. It is not possible, however, that in all theatres these rules of symmetry should answer all conditions and purposes, but the architect ought to consider to what extent he must follow the principles of symmetry, and to what extent it may be modified to suit the nature of the site or the size of the work. There are, of course, some things which, for utility's sake, must be made of the same size in a small theatre and a large one, such as the steps, curved cross aisles, their parapets, the passages, stairways, stages, tribunals, and any other things which occur that make it necessary to give up symmetry so as not to interfere with utility. Again, if in the course of the work any of the material falls short, such as marble, timber, or anything else that is provided, it will not be amiss to make it a slight reduction or addition, provided that it is done without going too far, but with intelligence. This will be possible if the architect is a man of practical experience and besides not destitute of cleverness and skill. 8. The scena itself displays the following scheme. In the center are double doors decorated like those of a royal palace. At the right and left are the doors of the guest chambers. Beyond are spaces provided for decoration, places that the Greeks called periaktoi, because in these places are triangular pieces of machinery which revolve, each having 3 decorated faces. When the play is to be changed, or when gods enter to the accompaniment of sudden claps of thunder, these may be revolved and present a face differently decorated. Beyond these places are the projecting wings which afford entrances to the stage, one from the forum, the other from abroad. 9. There are 3 kinds of scenes, one called the tragic, second the comic, third the satiric. Their decorations are different and unlike each other in scheme. Tragic scenes are delineated with columns, pediments, statues, and other objects suited to kings. Comic scenes exhibit private dwellings, with balconies and views representing rows of windows after the manner of ordinary dwellings. Satiric scenes are decorated with trees, caverns, mountains, and other rustic objects delineated in landscape style. Chapter 7. Greek Theatres. 1. In the theatres of the Greeks, these same rules of construction are not to be followed in all respects. First, in the circle at the bottom where the Roman has 4 triangles, the Greek has 3 squares with their angles touching the line of circumference. The square whose side is nearest to the scena and cuts off a segment of the circle determines by this line the limits of the proscaenium. Parallel to this line and tangent to the outer circumference of the segment, a line is drawn which fixes the front of the scena. Through the center of the orchestra and parallel to the direction of the proscaenium, a line is laid off, and centers are marked where it cuts the circumference to the right and left at the ends of the half circle. Then, with the compasses fixed at the right, an arc is described from the horizontal distance at the left to the left-hand side of the proscaenium. Again, with the center at the left end, an arc is described from the horizontal distance at the right to the right hand of the proscaenium. 2. As a result of this plan with 3 centers, the Greeks have a roomier orchestra and a scena set further back, as well as a stage of less depth. They call this the logeion for the reason that there the tragic and comic actors perform on the stage, while other artists give their performance in the entire orchestra. Hence, from this fact they are given in Greek the distinct name scenic and thymelic. The height of this logium ought not to be less than 10 feet nor more than 12. Let the ascending flights of steps between the wedges of seats, as far up as the first curved cross aisle, be laid out on lines directly opposite to the angles of the squares. Above the cross aisle, let other flights be laid out in the middle between the first, and at the top, as often there is a new cross aisle, the number of flights of steps is always increased to the same extent. Chapter 8. Acoustics of the site of a theatre. 1. All this having been settled with greatest pains and skills, we must see to it with still greater care that a site have been selected where the voice has a gentle fall, and is not driven back with a recoil so as to convey an indistinct meaning to the ear. There are some places which from their very nature interfere with the course of the voice, as for instance the dissonant, which are termed in Greek katechontes, the circumsonant, which with them are named periechontes, again the resonant, which are termed antechontes, and the consonant, which they call synechontes. The dissonant are those places in which the first sound uttered that is carried up high strikes against solid bodies above, and being driven back, checks as it sinks to the bottom the rise of the succeeding sound. 2. The circumsonant are those in which the voice spreads all round, and then is forced into the middle, where it dissolves, the case endings are not heard, and it dies away there in sounds of indistinct meaning. The resonant are those in which it comes into contact with some solid substance and recoils, thus producing an echo, and making the terminations of cases sound double. The consonant are those in which it is supported from below, increases as it goes up, and reaches the ears in words which are distinct and clear in tone. Hence, if there has been careful attention in the selection of the site, the effect of the voice will, through this precaution, be perfectly